So, hello everyone, the CUBE community, especially to our partners, BNG, Enel, Schweppes, Suntory, Sigfox, L'Oreal, Uber, Pelayo, Pfizer. First of all, you might be wondering why we are using this weird platform and not the typical Zoom meeting, Google Meet. Just to tell you a short story, Hopin was launched 8 months ago in March 2020. I think it's a familiar date for all of us. They launched with very, very basic functionalities in order to cover the needs of the market at the moment, and they have been improving the platform on the go. This is the kind of initiatives we like to support from the Cube. Today, Hopin is worth 2.1 billions after 8 months. It's one of the fastest growing companies in the world. It's true that the market was ready or was in need for a platform like this, but it's also true that you could only achieve this through a masterful or a perfect execution, such as these guys did. So let's go back to business after the short story. Thank you for joining the first webinar of the Radical Sessions. This is a series of short talks we have prepared along with the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship with a lot of love, with the purpose of nurturing our ecosystem with new concepts, new frameworks, new methodologies in order to innovate in a world that's clearly overcrowded with ideas and hungry for execution. So for this first webinar, I would like to introduce Bill Aulet, Managing Director of the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. He will be leading the talk today for corporations, innovate or die. He's going to be speaking for around 20 minutes, and then everyone is going to have a chance to ask a question to Bill through the chat. I will be picking up the most interesting questions for him to answer. Bill, I can see you are in stage right now and you have a lot prepared for us. So I don't want to take much time from you, and the stage is all yours. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Andreas, and thank you, Alberto, and thank you, CUBE, to be here. I'm sitting in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire right now, and very grateful to be in this safe place. And we're also very grateful we have a new president coming in, but that's another story that we're not going to talk about right now, although the stock market has responded very well. Look, there's a lot of challenges out there, and today I'm going to talk about innovate or die. And it's really, I'm very happy to see, just some of the companies, Daimler, Procter & Gamble, Ferrovial, Eni, Bosch, Nielsen, Heineken, Pascal, Santander, and Repsol, and many more. It sounds like Uber and Pfizer from the announcement. But I'm going to talk generally about corporate entrepreneurship. And it has never been more relevant than it is today. And I'm going to first talk about kind of stuff we cover in our classes here. And I don't expect that today's session will cover everything we cover in the class. But I just want to give you a sample, and hopefully you'll come back and we'll continue to build on what it is that we do. And then lastly, I want to talk about the COVID situation and what we've learned since then. So let me just take a few slides that we use in our corporate entrepreneurship class about, the first class starts out with, why corporate entrepreneurship? Is that an oxymoron? Does it really matter? And I always start with this quote. It is not, Charles Darwin studied species, and it is said that it's not the strongest species that survives. It is not the most intelligent species that survive, but the one that's the most responsive to change. This is the fundamental premise of the theory of evolution of species. And the question is, does this apply to corporations? And the answer is absolutely. And that's what I want to kind of go through today. Just because you're strong today, just because you might be smart, that's not what really will keep you in the game long term. You have to be able able, willing, and seize the opportunity to change when it presents itself. Not only has this been true since the oldest times, but it's getting more and more true today. Professor Richard Foster at Yale University studied the lifespan of companies listed on the S&P 500 index. And he has shown that that has decreased by more than 50 years from 1920 until 2012. 50 years. That's gone from 67 years to 15 years. And by the way, it's gone down even more so because the longest running company in the S&P 500, General Electric, is now out of the S&P 500. So this number is really going down. It shows you the increased speed of change. And we always talk about that. We talk about Sue Siegel's law. She came and talked at our corporate symposium about how the world will never be slower than it is today. It will only get faster and faster and faster. And you'd say, oh, that's crazy. It can't. But it does. And it does year after year after year. Technological, other societal forces, the climate, all these things are making our world much more susceptible to change in an increased pace. So if you embrace change, innovation, it can transform firms. When you look at DuPont, they became there were literally riots for their products when they came out with nylon stockings. Eli Lilly today would not exist. And actually, not only did they exist, they thrived because they were one of the first to move from random drug discovery to genetics and genomics, embracing that. And by the way, we'll talk about this. Now you see with the new kind of DNA techniques, the companies that are coming out with vaccines. Nokia went from making rubber boots to a global power in cell phones. Unfortunately, they have fallen back and may be back in the rubber boots business. But the positive innovation that they did really took the company to a whole nother level in Finland. And Corning Glass, and we could go on and on, IBM, Intel. So there's an upside to this, but today our topic was about innovate or die. So I want to just talk about the threat that not being innovative has to you. And when you look at this study by Rebecca Henderson, who was she was one of my professors at MIT when I was there. She's now at Harvard Business School. You can see, you don't need to understand photolithography equipment, but you can see every time there's a new technology that whoever is the leader in the last one becomes at best the second player. So when you look at contact, the technology of contact, Cobuilt was the leader. You don't need to know these companies. And then it moved to proximity, and Cobuilt was blown away. And the new leader became Canon, and Casper moved to be number 2 in the new world. But then they're gone when you move to the next generation of technology, scanner. And you can see on and on. This is what Clay Christensen referred to as disruptive technological innovation. It is not an advantage to be the leader in the previous technology. In fact, it's a disadvantage to be the leader unless you have kind of understand that things are going to change, you're paranoid, and how you're going to deal with that. And the road is littered with examples of companies that did not heed this kind of paranoid, kind of innovate or die strategy. And all of these companies here were leaders in their specific market segment. Timex being watches. When I grew up, you wanted coffee, instant coffee. You got Nescafe from Nestle. These companies may exist, but they're not the dominant forces that they once were because they did not innovate and keep up with the times. So you might say, well, there was upside and then there's this downside. And it seems to me that, Bausch & Lomb got picked off by Warby Parker. And Andreas was just talking about Hopin. Are we destined to lose if we're if we're big companies? Are we destined to lose to startups? Is it just a manifest destiny for them? Let's just step back and think about that logically for a second. I do this all the time with my students to start the class. I say, what assets do you have when you're a startup? What assets? And a lot of them are starting companies. I say, what assets do you have? And they say, my idea, my passion. Other people say, yeah, they have a real advantage. I go, what other assets do they have? And they say, well, they got people. I go, well, they don't really have people because they're not paying them very much. What other assets do they have? And the fact of the matter is, a startup has virtually no assets whatsoever. They have the founder's passion. They have an idea. They might have a patent, but patents, as we'll show you, are worth virtually nothing without other skills. But a startup has essentially no assets. It's asset light. You might say, isn't that an advantage? Well, let's look at what assets you have when you're a corporation. First of all, you have this thing called customers. You have lots of customers. Guess what the success state is for a startup? Is to get customers. So corporations already have a head start because they have customers, and they can start figuring out, how do we leverage those customers to get more customers? They already have products. Again, that's what you're trying to get to in a startup. You're trying to get to products that are accepted by customers. And so you can start the iterative loop with them to make them better. They already have sales. They have money coming in. Again, a startup is trying to get to the point where they have sales. They have established sales process and reputation. They know how to go to market. They've figured out unit economics. They've been measuring them. They actually have cash coming into the company. And they often have more cash coming into the company than is going out. Again, something that a startup aspires to, but does not have. They will also have computers. They might have buildings. They have a lot of other assets that they have acquired. Again, a startup doesn't have that. And you'll say, well, that's inertia. That's not good. No, it's actually what every startup wants. They want to have some hard assets. And they have built an organization, and this is non-trivial, that will produce optimal results and protect the owner's interest. It will protect the community's interest. It will protect the employee's interest if designed properly. So all of these things are the success state for a startup. And these, including the processes, and this is what we aspire to do. So why is it that startups are better at innovating than corporations? It's not a foregone conclusion, just to be clear. It's not a foregone conclusion. And if you were just to look at this, you might say corporations have a big advantage. And in some industries, they have an overwhelming advantage. If it's energy or healthcare, it's very, very hard for startups in those. It's much easier to innovate within a corporation. And we can come back to that in the Q&A. But still, we see repeatedly, which I'll talk about with Malcolm Gladwell's book, that startups do succeed. And why do they succeed? Well, when you're in a startup, you're given a blank canvas to paint a picture. And you can paint your picture. And you don't have to worry about many other things. I've just got this canvas. However, when you're in a big corporation, you're asked to paint a picture you're asked to paint on a canvas that already has a lot of paint and colors. And you're asked to paint a small part of that in an innovative way that will fit in with the rest of the picture. That makes the problem much more complicated. So when we teach our startup entrepreneurship, we teach a certain skill set, but then you need additional skill sets to be a good corporate entrepreneur. And these are the things that we're going to talk about in the series. So while it would seem, if you just looked at this thing from a static standpoint, that corporations have many advantages over startups, it's not true when you start peeling this back and looking at a systemic way, because they have to fit in. They have to align with all those other assets so that the situation in the corporation has much more inertia. Now, let's jump forward to some things that I always go through in my first class, no matter what. The first thing is, to be a successful innovator, you have to change the rules. So here's the story of David versus Goliath. As a new person into the market already exists. And if you play by the same rules, you will get crushed. as the story of David and Goliath. Goliath's a giant. They can't find anybody to fight him because he's the biggest giant. And then they find this small person, David. And it was like, everybody says it's crazy. David will get crushed by Goliath. But he doesn't, because he changes the rules. He decides that the rules will not be the ones that Goliath wants. The rules will be, I can use a slingshot and I can run around. And I'm not just going to come out onto the field and let you, fight me the way you want. And in that, he changes the very strength of Goliath, his enormous size, his strength, into a liability because he can't move around in the trees and he becomes a big target for the slingshot. And ultimately, David beats Goliath. And people say, oh, that's very unusual. How could he do it? Because David had none of the assets that Goliath had. What David did was he changed the rules. And this is what happens over and over again. When you think of the military analogies, David beats Goliath, as Malcolm Gladwell talks in his book, over 60% of the time if they change the rules. And it's true for innovators too. You have to know the rules. If you play by the same rules, you will get defeated, just like this young child is about to. You have to come up with new rules to the game. So let's just go and talk about the second thing. Innovating is about looking at things differently. As I was just talking to one of mine today, it's more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. You can't just do a Me Too product. You have to be willing to be different. So that's innovation. And so what does we mean by innovation? I think it's very important to understand innovation is something new that creates value. And invention is something that's new to the world, but it costs you money, a patent, an idea, a technology you've developed. And so these are not the same thing, because an invention costs you money, innovation makes you money. Something is missing. And what's missing is commercialization, which essentially is the entrepreneurial process. So how do you take something that's new, a patent, a technology, a new process, an idea, and figure out who does that create value for? And this is the part of the process that's so under-indexed by society. We love disruptive new technologies. We love, kind of patents, and we over-index for PhDs. Yet it's the entrepreneurs who are in short supply, and it's they who actually take new ideas, bring them to market, and make them innovations. So what do we know about this commercialization process? And that's what we're really going to focus on in this speaker series. So what we know is that if you want innovation, you have to have some invention. This is a product, and you need some commercialization. If it's zero, then you won't get any innovation. You can have all the patents in the world. You can be Nikola Tesla, but you're not going to make anything happen. Whereas Thomas Edison, not nearly as good an inventor, he had commercialization capability. So he was able to bring much more innovation to the world than Nikola Tesla, even though Nikola Tesla was, by all metrics, a superior inventor. So it's this kind of these two factors you need to bring innovation: invention and commercialization. So if you looked at this equation, you might say, well, then let's just get the most innovation we can and the most commercialization. That would be a logical conclusion from this one slide, but I want to bring in one other point that's critically important, and I want to drive this point home in an example afterwards, is invention is kind of coming up with new ideas, technology, patents, and commercialization is how do we bring that to market, right? And who's the customer? But you can't just have great invention and great commercialization and have them link once, because you're trying to iterate rapidly to figure out what the customer wants, what the market wants. And so what's really important here is the connective tissue between these two that allows you to go very, very rapidly. We call this clock speed. How many times can you iterate on a new idea when the first 24 hours you have it, or any 24 hours you have it? Because you never can build the right product in the laboratory. In the product, you have to put it in the customer's hand, get feedback, make adjustments quickly, and go back and forth. And let me just give you a concrete example of this. I started my career at IBM in 1982. And there's this great movie, which I encourage all you to see, where I'm the bad guy in it, called Silicon Cowboys. And at the time, IBM was the preeminent company in the world. We owned the computer market. Our biggest competitor was, our biggest feared competitor was the US government constantly trying to break us up for being a monopoly. And so we had dominated the mainframe industry. The personal computer industry came along. We had a personal computer that essentially got dominated, 100% market share, essentially, of the business market. And if you looked at us, IBM had tremendous invention capability through our labs. We had tremendous commercialization, but the problem was they didn't work with each other in a very rapid way. While I was out here in the marketplace understanding how things were changing, it would take me a year to get that information over here and to get them to give me anything meaningful and feedback. So the time to market, the time to iterate on new ideas was a year. Despite our enormous advantage in invention, our enormous advantage in commercialization, we were unable to move quickly. And we got beat by a very small company called Compaq. And they ran away with the personal computer industry, and IBM never recovered to this day. And that's a story that it's not just invention, it's not just commercialization, it's the clock speed between them. So, innovator die, does it matter? Absolutely. And even if you're successful today, success has an expiration date on it. And all you can do is try to extend it over and over again by being innovative. Remember, it's not the strongest that survives. It's not the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most responsive to change. So now what I want to do is I want to talk about what we've seen in the past. Let me just close this window out. What we've seen in the past, it's been 9 months now. And I had the opportunity to meet with 3 of the poster children of success last week. Let me just go through this very quickly, Andreas. Zoom, Peloton, and Grubhub. These companies have just exploded since COVID. And as we look at them, what have they done that other people have not done? And I have an article coming out on this, but let me just tell you the 5 key points from my vantage point after speaking to them and really thinking about this. And sorry, 6 points. First of all, you have to understand how technology capabilities are changing. That's kind of what you hear from Clay Christensen's work and people of that. That is number one. You do need to understand that it is necessary and wholly insufficient. It will tell you what's possible in the future. The second thing you have to understand does not relate to the technology. It relates to human behavior. What are the consumer behavior patterns changing? And understand those as well. The third thing is you need to build an organization with the capability to realize this opportunity. You have to say, we realize that this is going to be at some point in the future, but we don't know when, but when it does, we want to be positioned to do that. Because you can never have a crystal ball to do that, but you have to say, look, with this vector of technology and this vector of consumer behavior, there's a possible future state that will include video conferencing. And we're going to guess it could be in this time frame. So that would be number 3. So you have to understand the technology, understand the consumer behavior, build an organization that can start to deliver on this promise. And then the fourth thing is you must recognize when lightning strikes. When there is a window of opportunity, I talk about this in the Disciplined Entrepreneurship Workbook. When there's a window of opportunity, you must act swiftly. You must kick into high gear and make investments, not cut back. You must make investments with the understanding that you don't know the answer, but you must make it. Understand we are in a window of opportunity. These 2 vectors that we've seen, technology and consumer behavior, are happening. And now we're in a window of opportunity. We must invest now. We don't know for sure what's going to happen, but we must invest. Let's go. This is the time. The fifth thing is you then have to move very quickly, as I just talked about. Clock speed, that slide I've told you, that showed you before, and I've talked about for years now, that is incredibly important in a crisis. And then once you've got this idea that there's this convergent journal window of opportunity, we're going to move very, very rapidly, then you have to be data driven. You have to have metrics that kind of measure customer engagement, measure net promoter score, measure everything. And this is the story of Netflix. All of them are huge believers in kind of this data-driven approach. This is not some sort of gut feeling where Steve Jobs said, the future, I have a crystal ball and here it is. They put hypotheses up. They don't know whether they're true or not, but they make sense. And then they test them and they very rapidly make adjustments until they get to the right place. And that's frankly, Zoom was not the best technology. Were they the best position? No, but they understood these 6 points, and that's what made them different. And the same thing for Peloton and the same thing for Grubhub. They didn't start from behind the curve. They anticipate understanding technology and consumer behavior. They had made some investments to be ready for it. And then when they saw the window of opportunity, they stepped on the gas and they moved very rapidly. And then they made adjustments. So with that, I've exceeded my time, but can we turn it over to questions? Alberto, Andreas?
I'm here on the stage. Bill, super interesting. I guess the audience has some questions for you. You can type the questions on the chat. Let's wait until people write their questions. Anyway, Bill, super interesting and 100% with you. I always say that the ideas are worth zero. What matters is in the execution. And in order to execute the ideas properly, you need the culture, the company culture, to be able to adapt and to execute different ideas, different initiatives that come along with these shocks, such as the shock we have right now in COVID, and adapt and redesign your strategy on the go.
Mm-hmm. So I think, Andreas, what we've talked about a lot is, we're engineers at MIT. When we know that it's culture, but what exactly is culture? What do we do to focus people on those elements of culture that are the most important? And that's why I have those 6 points. And that's why, you've heard me before talk about innovation equals invention times commercialization. Neither can be zero, but this clock speed thing has always been there, but boy, has it become big during COVID.
Totally. So I see no questions on the chat, Bill. So I guess that you left everything super clear to everyone.
Well, if we still have time, I can say a few other things. Is that okay, Andreas?
100%.
Yeah. So in COVID, it's really been we've seen cracks in the system, but those are the most interesting times. And so you need to have the right mindset to say a crisis is an opportunity. And as I was just talking about, if you are positioned, it's a window of opportunity where you should invest. And you don't know with certainty, but all you can do is improve your odds. And there's 2 books. One of them is right here. I'm just going to bring up called The Biggest Bluff. And this is a book that I read over the past pandemic, the past month. It's called The Biggest Bluff. Right, you can see it right there. And it has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It's all about this journalist, PhD, Russian psychologist woman who wants to understand the relationship between luck and skill. And so she goes and becomes a professional poker player and goes through it.
Bill, so many questions are popping up right now. So I will
okay. Let me just wrap it up. I recommend this book to understand how luck plays a role, but it is not, it's important, but it's not as important as people might make you think. And the other one is by Fareed Zakaria, Lessons from a Post-Pandemic World. All right, Andreas, fire away. I know my friends at Ferrovial will have questions. They always do.
So first we have Manuel Mosquera. He said he said that you said something about corporations are a better place sometime to innovate than startups. Can you expand on this? Why and how?
Startups are very good for low-hanging fruit, where you don't need heavy infrastructure, and they fall into the category where they're very dependent on Moore's law and Metcalfe's law. Moore's law means the power of the chip doubles every 18 months. So in that case, they're not that dependent on other things we know they're going to change. In industries like energy, where innovation takes decades, 30 years, that's not a good place for a startup, because they're not built to last for decades. They're built to make to move very, very quickly. So when you're thinking about energy or healthcare, you're much more likely to see innovation in some of the large companies, and that's borne out. Because going back to the slide, that you need assets on the ground. A startup can't recreate the grid. They can't recreate pipelines. They don't have access to that kind of capital. Capital is very expensive to them, but to big companies like utility companies or companies with strong balance sheet, they're able to invest in that and think longer term.
Perfect. I have another question which I think is super interesting. How can we help corporations to start innovating with a white sheet instead of having the picture almost defined? From Mario Lucchetti.
Yeah, really good question. What company does that come from? Can you tell me the companies? I'm always interested.
It doesn't specify.
Okay, because then I can give more examples. Look, what I recommend to people is get your innovators away from the legacy business. Put them in a different location. Give them a different incentive system. They dress differently. And by the way, this is why TheCUBE is good. If I have a big corporation,
from Schweppes and Unilever.
From Unilever
and Schweppes.
Okay. First of all, I think you need to get distance, arm's length distance, and that's why these working. And I'm not here. I'm going to answer the question, not as a commercial for TheCUBE, but this is why a place like TheCUBE is so important. In a company, there's management and there's entrepreneurship. Management is taking an existing business and making it more profitable, making it grow incrementally, making it more predictable. The art of entrepreneurship, the craft of entrepreneurship is creating new products. It's creating new opportunities. So the people who manage it, you can't mix that kind of mindset in with the people who are trying to be entrepreneurial, because it just doesn't work. It's two different operating systems. So what I tell people is, you really want to innovate, give people general challenges, put them in a different place, allow them to act differently. It's a different kind of subculture within the organization, what I call an operating system, and that's how it can work. But there has to be some tether back, some connection back to the mothership.
So as we're running out of time, we have time for one more question from Ciro Acedo from Ferrovial. So regarding collaboration between startups and corporations, how can we reduce the distance between these two animals? How they teach each other to speak a common language?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to set up kind of like in a car, you have a flywheel. These two organizations are going at different speed. A startup's going very, very fast. The corporation goes slower, not because that's the right way to do it. Because if you're a big corporation, you already have assets. You want to be more conservative. So you need to set up an organization that can work between these, that has a different kind of clock speed, because those two clock speeds are very different. And then you have to engage. I believe, being an entrepreneur, you have to offer them something concrete. And people say, well, you can be a partner with us. The ability to make investments, to offer them cash, to offer them customers, you have to give people concrete things. In a corporation, you can put up slides and you can say, here's something that's good for the long term. In a startup, remember, they're going so fast. In a startup, what do you want? You need customers, you need money, you need employees. And if you can't help with those things, if it's something that's more amorphous, then that's not going to be a good match for them. But I think someone like Ferrovial has all those assets. And so you should be able to make an attractive value proposition to startups. You just need to have someone who can go between those two different clock speeds.
Thank you very much, Bill. So, and thank you everyone for joining the first edition of the Radical Sessions. We wish we had more time to answer all the questions we have, but for sure we're gonna take all the questions into consideration to prepare the next webinar. So thank you very much for joining, and see you on January on the next session. Bye.
Merry Christmas. Feliz Navidad.